I'm on the phone with Rob Natelson from the Independence Institute, and tremors went through the judicial world and the legislative world yesterday, Rob, when it was announced that Judge Antonin Scalia had passed away. And of course, thus begins the process of naming and confirming another Supreme Court justice. But before we get into that process, I understand that you have some memories about Antonin Scalia.
Well, he was very kind to me. I mean, he cited my work in his opinion on the recess appointments case 2 years ago. Also, while I never actually met him, after he visited the University of Montana and made some assumptions about me that somebody pointed out were not true, he sent me a letter essentially apologizing and urging me to come to Washington, D.C. and visit him. I have to say I never did, though. It just never happened.
Okay. So when you first heard that Judge Scalia had passed away, what were your thoughts as a constitutional scholar?
Well, my thought as a human being, I think, is more important. I was absolutely crushed. This is a person who is, by all accounts, one of the greatest justices in recent times, perhaps of all time. He was, by all accounts, everybody across the spectrum agrees, probably the greatest intellect on the court. And he was someone who was a leader of a constitutional movement, the movement toward originalism and textualism, which was largely created by Justice Scalia in the 1980s.
So now that he has passed, and of course you need 9 Supreme Court justices to have the complete Supreme Court. President Obama still has a year left in his term. So what do you see happening next, Rob?
I think it's going to be a political football. I think the conventional wisdom on this is correct. There have been times in the past where the court has been reduced in size because of political wrangling, as there have been times when the court has increased in size due to political wrangling. There's nothing in the Constitution that requires there to be 9 justices, and there's nothing in the Constitution that would require the Republican Senate to approve President Obama's nomination. So I think it's going to be a difficult situation. Part of the problem is caused by the fact that President Obama has been very confrontational with Republicans, so that people like Orrin Hatch, who in the past have supported nominees of Democratic presidents, like as Orrin Hatch, Senator from Utah, supported Ruth Bader Ginsburg, they're much less inclined to grant the same kind of courtesy or accommodation to President Obama than they have been to Democratic presidents of the past.
Now, Rob, is there anyone that you can think of, and I realize it's been less than 24 hours since I first spoke with you about this, is there anyone that you think that President Obama might think worthy of a Supreme Court appointment?
I'd rather not speculate on that. I mean, I've not really had the opportunity to consider the field, and it actually seems like jumping the gun to do so. I mean, I think that our country is going to go through a period of mourning for Justice Scalia in a way that we have historically not done so for Supreme Court justices. He was so widely respected, even among people who so strongly disagreed with his judicial philosophy, that I think it's appropriate for us to get past that first.
All right. So since the president has less than a year left in his term, do you think it would be possible to be able to nominate and confirm a justice in that time?
Of course it's possible. I mean, it depends on who President Obama would nominate, and it obviously depends upon what mood the Republicans in the Senate are to consider the nomination.
Okay. So in your view, again, as there at the Independence Institute, in your opinion, what happens next?
Well, some of the Republicans leaders, including Orrin Hatch and the majority leader of the Senate, Mike McConnell, have made it clear that they don't want to confirm anyone until after the presidential election. I think historically what would happen is that there would be discussions between the White House and the leadership of the Senate on perhaps a compromise candidate. I'm not optimistic that that's going to produce any results in this case because of the poor relationship between President Obama and the Republican majority. Remember, this is a president somewhat unlike prior presidents in that he tends to demonize the opposition to a unusually great extent, and so I don't think they're going to be very much in the mood to cooperate with him.
All right. Any final words, Rob, as we begin to step forward into this process?
Well, I think that people need to realize what an important and a valuable person they lost with the passing of Justice Scalia. He was probably among the top three, very possibly the greatest writer of judicial opinions in the history of the court. Certainly that would be true in the case of dissents. He was also a great social commentator. I heard him talk a few weeks before he died, for example, on the subject of Catholic and Christian education. So he had thought a great deal and had a great deal to say on things that were not related to law. And then, as I mentioned a minute ago, he actually helped to create the originalist or textualist movement that has had so much influence on the court in recent years.